Thank you.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, who's that?
Monette.
I'm Annette. How have you been?
I've been great. How about you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Great to see you, Monat, back at work.
Yes, I've been back for a while now. I was only out for 2 weeks.
Wow, that's a quick recovery. Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you. So Mark, whose idea was it for this long Zoom meeting? Was this you?
The idea of what?
A long Zoom meeting. It's torturous.
I know. Well, there was a little thing called the pandemic, I guess, that got in the way here.
Just a tiny thing, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you can remember, but we did have, I think the first meeting was, or the first two meetings of the Governor's Workforce Council were in person.
Very pleasantly in person. Yes,
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to add that it was an hour drive up and an hour drive back.
Yeah.
That is true, Cindy. Next
And
time
we
we have
can
to
only
carpool.
fit, yeah, and we can only fit like so many people in the room. And this way we have a lot more people who can attend. So there's good and bad in both formats, I would imagine.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I don't know how many we'll have today, but if we have like 200, for example, which is quite possible, that can be more challenging, physically.
So it's just stating that it should have been already moved. What happened was she never used it after she purchased it, and they never paid it. Now it wasn't paid for it. It's on.
I could just ask everyone to please put your microphones on mute when you're talking. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Hello, Kelly.
Hello. It's so nice to see everyone. Oh,
I know.
Laura, hello. I got your email today.
Hi, this is Uri here.
Hello.
Hi. Just going to wait for one more minute and then we'll get going. Okay, so let's get going because we do have a busy agenda today. Welcome everyone to the third quarter meeting of the newly expanded Governor's Workforce Council. I want to thank all of our returning members of the GWC for continuing to serve on the council. And I'd also like to extend a really warm welcome to the many new members of the council. In a few minutes, we will introduce the members of the council as we do a roll call and vote on approving the minutes from our last meeting. But first, I want to share a little bit about the focus of today's meeting and review the agenda. So, Laura, could you put up the agenda page? Many of you will remember that a year ago in our Governor's Workforce Council meeting, we approved our strategic plan, which we did send out in the pre-reads. Over the past year, a lot of great work has been done by the Office of Workforce Strategy, by council members, and our many partners, many of whom are on this call, to make progress against the Governor's Workforce Council's 19 strategic initiatives. Our committees have been extremely active in doing this work. In our last meeting in July, we discussed the significant education and workforce legislation that was passed by the legislature in June, which we are busy implementing. Today, we're going to share some updates to the strategic plan, how we plan to organize our efforts to accelerate progress. And we'll also highlight some key initiatives within our strategic plan today and do short updates on them. We're going to be talking about Career Connect. Governor Lamont is going to join us at that point to talk about the significant reskilling and job training program that's focused on getting our people back to work. Skills-based hiring. Our partners at Year Up will describe how we're working with employers to embrace skills-based hiring so that high-quality jobs can be distributed more equitably across the workforce. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll hear about our exciting DEI effort that's engaging dozens of community leaders across the state around program and policy development, focusing on marginalized populations in our state. Campus CT. We'll get an update from our partners at Advanced CT, who have launched our signature college graduate retention program so that we can retain more college graduates in Connecticut. We will hear an update from Erica Smith, a council member, about one of our exciting biotech regional sector partnerships. And finally, discuss a new federal grant opportunity called the Good Jobs Challenge that builds upon our last year's work in creating regional sector partnerships all across the state. But preceding these plan updates, I want to just talk a little bit about our powerhouse panel that we're going to have shortly, discussing the labor market challenges that the country is facing right now. Despite the very high levels of unemployment that still exist, our country has the largest number of job openings in history, and that's definitely true of Connecticut as well. In our state, healthcare employers face huge shortages in filling nursing and technician roles. Our manufacturing companies are having difficulty hiring people, which contributes to the supply chain issues and shortages of goods that we're seeing across our economy. Many companies need digital workers and are struggling to find enough people who have the digital and IT skills that are needed for so many jobs today. But the problems and challenges are across really all sectors. We'll hear today about the challenges that businesses and workers face and families, and some of the best solutions to address these issues. Now I'd like to do the housekeeping part of the meeting, where we will review the minutes, and at the same time as doing that, we'll be doing a roll call so people get to be introduced to our council members. Can a council member make a resolution to approve the minutes from our July meeting?
So moved.
Can somebody second it?
Second.
Okay. So now we will do a roll call and ask each approved council member or their designee to vote on the minutes.
Mark,
Yes?
Mark, would the two folks who motioned and seconded, can you please state your name for the recording, please?
Marna Borgstrom, I made the motion.
Cindy Bigelow, I second the motion.
Thank you, Marna and Cindy. And before I call people's out, I want to apologize that there are, I'm sure, some people on this call who are still in the process of being reviewed by the governor's office. So we will be, in our next meeting, probably adding, well, we definitely will be adding some additional people. So I will call out people's names. And please indicate whether you are voting to approve the minute, or not, or abstaining. Alexis Gavanter,
Hi, I vote to approve.
okay. Welcome, Alexis, to the council. Andrew Aguanabi,
Yes.
welcome.
Same.
Welcome, Andrew. Andrew's the new president of UConn. Welcome.
Thank you.
Andrew Bond.
I vote to approve. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Andrew. Anthony Medici from Medtronic, who is also a new council member. Brian Doubles. I'm sorry.
Hey, Mark, George Anderson here for Brian.
Okay.
To approve.
Okay. Charlene Russell Tucker.
Hey, vote to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner. Cindy Bigelow.
Approved.
Don, Commissioner Bartolomeo.
Approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Lehman. Ed Hawthorne, who is a new member and the incoming president of the AFL-CIO.
How you doing? I'll abstain since I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. Welcome to the council, Ed.
Thank you.
Erica Smith.
Approve.
Okay. James Laurie or Marty Guay.
Marty Guay on behalf of Jim Lurie, approved.
Okay. Jay Williams. Jeffrey Flax. John Murphy.
Yeah, Mark, I'm going to abstain as well. I wasn't at the meeting, so I think that makes sense.
Okay. Judy Olean.
Approve.
Kathy Szilard, who is a new council member, CEO of Stanford Hospital. Kelly Marie Valeries.
Approve.
Carrie Hone, who's a new council member representing the UFCW Labor Union.
Hi, I'm going to abstain because I wasn't in the meeting either, but thanks for having me.
Welcome, Carrie. Dr. Torres Rodriguez. Leticia Colin de Mejas, a new council member.
Hello, Mark. How are you? I also wasn't there, so I'll abstain. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Leticia, to the council. Maggie Hulse or Jack Mahoney representing her.
Yep, this is Jack Mahoney representing Maggie Hulse. Vote to approve. Thank you.
Okay. I vote to approve. Marna Borgstrom.
Approve.
Michelle James, who is a new council member and is executive director of the Community Action Agency of Western Connecticut.
I was at the meeting and I approved.
Great. Molly Kellogg, who's a new council member, CEO of Hubbard Hall.
Thank you. I was not at the meeting, so I will abstain.
Okay. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you.
Manette Ferguson.
Hello, I approve.
Governor Lamont is not here yet. Mayor Neil O'Leary from Waterbury, and welcome to the council, Mayor.
Hi, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I have to abstain as well as I wasn't there.
Okay. Mayor Peter Nystrom from the city of Norwich, and welcome, Mayor, to the council. Ravi Kumar or Jeff Walker.
I'm there. Approved. I was there in the meeting, so that's.
Thank you, Ravi. Ray Pinault, the CEO of Mohegan Gaming and Entertainment, a new member of the council. Representative Tony Walker.
Good afternoon, and I approve.
Great to see you, Representative Walker.
Same to you. Same here.
Sal Menzo. Sharon Barr from Alexion.
Hi, I'm here, but I was not here at the last one because I'm new, so I'll abstain.
Sharon, welcome to the council.
Thank you so much. Pleased to be here.
Shelley Davis, who is the president of the AFL-CIO in Hartford and is a new council member.
I was not at that meeting, so I will also abstain. Thank you.
Okay, well, welcome to the council.
Thank you.
Sue Figueredo, from Travelers.
Yep, hi, approved.
Okay, hi Sue. Surya Kant, who is a new council member and chairman of Tata.
Yeah, good afternoon. I wasn't there at the meeting, so I'd like to abstain.
Okay. And Terrence Chung, president of the CSCU. Okay.
Mark, this is Jeff Flax. I had stepped away when I was roll called, but I am here and I do approve.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. So the minutes does pass. There were 20 yeses and 9 abstentions due to not being here for the prior meeting. But really excited that everybody is now, all the new members of our council and the members coming back. Now I'm thrilled to introduce our guest speakers regarding kind of the labor market challenges. Each person is going to give a short presentation followed by an open Q&A session. And we would encourage any of the participants here to please write questions into the chat line as we go along, so you don't forget your questions, and we will do our best to ask as many questions as we can. Our first speaker is Dr. Marin Jaja, Managing Director and Senior Partner from the Boston Consulting Group. Marin has worked over the past 20 years with senior leaders in the public, private, and civil sectors. His work in the public and civil sectors focused on education, economic development, public finance, violence protection, and he has coordinated the Boston Consulting Group's global response to COVID around the world. Prior to joining Boston Consulting Group, Dr. Jaja was a scientific researcher in neuroscience at Boston University. We also have Josh Kopis, who is a director at Jobs for the Future, the leading nonprofit in the country focused on workforce development and career pathways. He's filling in the last minute for his CEO, Maria Flynn of Jobs for the Future. Josh leads their Awake initiative to work with innovative workforce boards across the country, including in our state Capital Workforce Partners, to develop innovative ways for workers to navigate complex career challenges. And prior to Jobs for the Future, Josh served as the Chief Operating Officer of the National Association of Workforce Boards. Daniel Culbertson is an economist with the Indeed Hiring Labs, a global research institute leveraging Indeed's vast employment database containing the latest market trends. And finally, our council member and leader, Ravi Kumar. As many of you know, Ravi's the president of Infosys, one of the leading IT services companies in the world. He also serves as the chair of the GWC Education and Career Building Committee, and is a partner of the Governor's Workforce Council in developing innovative reskilling programs in IT. So I'd like to start with Marin.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for the introduction. It's great to see so many people interested in this challenge. And really what I wanted to focus on today is the state of the labor market, but now and into the future, and how to think about the skills mismatch problem. In particular, I would submit our work and others' work would suggest this is an $8 trillion problem globally affecting 1 in 3 workers. And if we distill that down to Connecticut, we don't have the data for how many workers. It might be a little less than 1 in 3, but at that scale, it's probably a $15 billion problem for the GDP in Connecticut. And it's really a combination of people who don't have the skills to fill the higher skilled jobs that are needed, or people who are overskilled for the jobs that they're filling, and both are an issue. And I want to talk a little bit today about where we are relative to that in the current state in the economy coming out of COVID, and where we expect to go over the next couple of years. So 3 things to cover: the challenge now and into the future, what we think business, government, and education can do, because it is a whole of society response that's required, and some practical examples where we think there's some concrete things that can be done and some of the things that we've seen done. If we go to the next page, this probably provides an overview of how we see the labor market changing, and in particular, the skills mismatch evolving. Right now, we're seeing major bottlenecks in the economy. You see and read about those every day in the supply chain, and we also see and read about them every day in the labor force. There are real imbalances in supply and demand because there was a major demand shock followed by a supply restriction, and now we have a supply and demand shock on the back end of COVID, and it's taken some time to readjust. I'll talk a little bit about how that varies by sector and how that varies by segment of the population. The other thing that COVID has done is exacerbate many of the D&I gaps that we've seen before. Those who have the fewest resources have struggled the most through COVID, and we're seeing that particularly acute among students. We have a whole generation of students, particularly students of color, who have had lasting damage because of the time in class. If you think about it, those who are least advantaged rely the most on formal education as a proportion of what develops their human capital. And when you take a lot of that away, both in terms of overall volume as well as effectiveness, it has a huge impact. The other thing that we're seeing around the world is the workforce that's returning post-pandemic is physically, socially, emotionally, and mentally less healthy than the one we had in 2019. And that's not to say we were the picture of health in 2019, but really recognizing that, understanding that, and changing how we're working in order to accommodate and address that is going to be an important element of the immediate term. As then we look ahead over the next few years, we've accelerated the digital transformation of the economy. In many respects, we've seen close to 10 years of digital progress in 18 months as we've digitized large parts of our economy. That has profound consequences, and that's going to continue. But that may leave millions of people behind whose jobs have been either automated or digitized, or who don't have the skills to actually participate in this newer, more digital economy. We also need to recognize that the future of work is going to be different. Things have changed permanently post-pandemic. We are more bionic as organizations, but also what we as employees want is very different than what we had before. And then lastly, there are major industries that are going to be transformed. I'll use one example, which is what the electric vehicle will do to the internal combustion engine automotive industry. That is going to shift value, but more importantly, will transform the jobs and skills that are required. And then as we look out onto the horizon and think about where we need to be in the future, we think the skills mismatch is going to accelerate. So if the economy moves faster and faster, which there's tons of data to show, how do humans keep up? We only have so much bandwidth to learn. How do we actually change institutions and people to be able to keep pace with that faster and faster progress? And how do we make sure that individuals and institutions can adapt to that uncertainty? As we look ahead, we think that we need to build much greater capability across the whole of society for a human-centric workforce development process. And it's really a challenge because it's a bit of a collective action problem across a number of stakeholders. So that's the context. Let me go to the next page, which is a bit of a dense data page, but I'm just going to quickly describe what it is. So on the x-axis, this shows the level of firing. Where is the current level of jobs for different sectors relative to where we were pre-COVID? And on the y-axis, it's hiring. What is the change in job openings since COVID? How many open jobs do we have? And you can see there's a scatter of different sectors here. The important thing to note is we're not looking in aggregate at hiring more than what we had in 2019 in particular. But there are two things that have happened. One, it is a lot easier and faster to fire than it is to hire. And in particular, when we do, people tend to move around and shift careers, they shift industry sectors, et cetera. The other thing that's going on is there's some shift going on among the sectors. And so as we look at some of the ones that are over in the green, kind of on the top right, number 7, non-durable goods manufacturing, this is packaged food, for example. And so they're trying to hire at a level that would put them well above where they were pre-COVID, but there's not a ton of workers out there. So people are seeing wage pressure because they're trying to hire back at extraordinary speed to be able to deliver against the demand that they're seeing. If we go to the next page, I'll just double click now and not look by sector, but let's look by segment of the population. This just shows workforce participation rate by age. And the white vertical line is showing you where COVID hit. As you can see, for the youngest workers, 25 to 29, and some of the oldest workers, they're actually participating. So I know there's a lot of discussion in the media of people sitting on couches who are young playing video games, and that older people are staying out of the workforce because they're afraid for their safety, et cetera. But the data wouldn't really bear that out. One thing that we are seeing, which is a real challenge, is middle-aged people staying out of the workforce. People 35 to 39 are staying out of the workforce in significant numbers, and these are some of our most productive workers. What's going on underneath that? Well, what's going on is many of them are seeing that their childcare situations are precarious, especially if they're relying on formal childcare or schools to provide childcare for them, and they don't think they can go back to the same job. Now, as schools stay open and people are at schools, maybe this will address itself. But you can see a structural problem we have, that we need probably policy solutions if we can't keep schools open for people to have the confidence that they can send their kids back and they can go back to work safely. The next page just touches on some data around what we're seeing. So mental health issues have increased by 4x. The level of burnout is 67% of workers talking about burnout. Low wage unemployment. I mentioned earlier that the least advantaged workers are the ones who've gotten hit hardest. 30% among low wage workers, well below what we've historically seen. So we've got some work to do to recover back to where we were in 2019. And then my last point around the socioeconomically disadvantaged, we saw attendance rates, or lack of attendance, that is, of 25% among the low-income students in online classes. So many times they didn't have a place that they could study. They didn't have a place where they had connectivity. And so they just stayed out. And so again, that learning loss and the need to renew that learning is pretty substantial. And I know a number of states, and I hope Connecticut as well, are working on that to try to recover. So that's a bit of the challenge here now. And that's really sort of, think of that as almost the emergency response over the next year or two as we try to put things in place to recover from the pandemic. If we shift gears then on the next page and talk about what do things look like further out, think about how work is changing. So for the first time, we've realized that we now have the technology to separate work from a physical location in a meaningful, scalable, industrial way. Historically, kind of work and workplace were linked. There have been a few exceptions to that, but now you have people who either do physical work or need to physically be present at work, but you have a large segment of the society that has no need to physically be at a workplace. So people are looking for their work to be unbundled, both in terms of time and in terms of location. You're looking at gig workers. People want more entrepreneurship. People want more human-centric work. We have augmented work. So I mentioned earlier the notion of a bionic workforce, a combination of AI and digital technology with people, and how do you get the most out of that? In the future, we might not be on Zoom, we might be in virtual or augmented reality spaces where we're interacting and can see each other fully physically, even if we're not physically present. And then on the last point, distributed work. So really being able to be location agnostic. Some of that has historically been the case as people have outsourced to different countries, but this is actually now, again, at a much greater scale. If we go to the next page, I mentioned earlier that some industries are going to be hit very hard. This is looking at EV and AV, and it just is looking at the current internal combustion engine value chain and profit pools in automotive, right, cars. You can see that's actually shrinking in terms of the value. But the growth in new electric components, new car sales, after sales, connectivity, on-demand mobility. So think about the Ubers of the world, dramatic growth in the profit pool. And this belies, as you think about autonomous vehicles, all of the jobs that are out there that have a big chunk of driving in them. There's some estimates that would say there's 10 million jobs connected directly to the auto industry or indirectly because they're a heavy driving component. That's a pretty big chunk of the overall US workforce. And almost all of them are going to be impacted by this electric vehicle and autonomous vehicle transformation. So how do we actually reskill and retrain and redeploy those workers? We're seeing this play out in real time in trucking. Many of you who work in trucking know that right now it's pretty much impossible to get a reasonable rate because there's no drivers. So over the course of the pandemic, there were drivers that were coming out, very few were going to school. So we have no new supply of drivers. And if you look at the current students going into commercial driving, there's not enough of them to fill the people who are leaving, which makes sense if you look ahead and say, well, in 5 or 10 years, there's going to be autonomous rigs. Do I really want to get into this business? So how do we manage that transition? How do we train workers for a 5-year career and not for a 15, 20, 25-year career? And that's a broader question than just in trucking. If we go to the next slide, there are bigger issues at work across the different stakeholders. So from a government standpoint, we don't have all the data and information we need. We need to adapt the programs quickly to what's happening. We need to get alignment across the stakeholders, which is always a challenge. And we need to think about clusters and breaking the problem down into smaller ecosystems. Businesses are facing a digital disruption and at the same time need new talent and new ways of working. How do I think about the trade-off between today and the future, which is a perpetual challenge, obviously? How do I think about diverse talent? My comments earlier around students apply actually to what we're seeing on business intake as well in terms of hiring. And how does business participate in those ecosystems? And then think about the pinch for educators. How do we quickly change the streams to the in-demand fields? That requires a change in curriculum, a change in workforce in the educational system. That's a lot of lead time, but we may not have that much lead time in some cases. How do we actually deal with lifelong learning and digital delivery? How do we modularize education? Because we're very committed to our 2-year and 4-year model, but what if we need to do something very different for the future, for adult learners? How do we think about different locations, calendar intensity, moving away from the traditional agrarian academic calendar? And then finally, the individual has a real challenge because you've got this faster and faster moving world with more and more complexity and more opportunity. How do they navigate that? Who can they trust to give them guidance? How do they deal with the lack of security they have financially? And in particular, how do they deal with the D&I gaps for them at work and at school? If we go to the next page, this starts to outline how we see a potential solution, which is we think there are 4 components that the different actors that are represented here today need to focus on. Thinking about the supply of the workforce, thinking about the demand in terms of the jobs that are out there, and then thinking about the matching. How do you make the market, right? If we have an inefficient market in some dislocation, we can try to regulate that market, or we could also try to help make that market. And both are important. And I think one of the challenges we have is we spend too much time on regulation and not market making. And then there's some enablers that we see. If we go to the next page, what we tried to lay out based on our experience and the work that we're doing with governments and businesses around the world is what are some of those things across those 4 dimensions that we can do here and now, in the near term, and then over the long term. So for example, how does the government think about whole of economy workforce planning to really have a more systemic and systematic view? How do we actually think about fostering innovation and entrepreneurship? And I know a number of people on the phone today are doing that. How do we actually help individuals navigate the job and career and skilling journeys, especially from a D&I standpoint. And then how do we think about the safety net that we have for next generation work and lifelong learning? Do we need to think about, instead of unemployment insurance, is it skills insurance? Are we going to be giving people some allocation in order to go get retrained and reskilled? And again, there's some innovation going on around this right now. I'm not going to drag you through the rest of the page, but suffice it to say that business, educators, and individuals all have a part to play in this overall journey that we see from now all the way into the future. And if we go to the next page, I'll just close by highlighting a handful of examples that we've had the privilege to be close to, really around the world, looking at different elements of this. So work we've done in Texas on aim higher, at CCM for Virginia, the Illinois P20 Council. I was directly involved here, really thinking about supply, demand, and matching, and some of the different pieces that we could do. And then from an enabler standpoint, as you think about the architecture, the tech, the governance around that, the World Economic Forum has really tried to define skills architecture and even taxonomy so that we could actually all agree on what are the actual fundamental skills. Similarly, the Singapore government has built a reskilling platform for mid-career professionals. So this isn't just people who are low-skilled professionals. These are very high-skilled professionals that are looking for a career change, in particular digital, and built a platform for reskilling as a service so that you could actually build a distributed, scalable model for doing this. I'll close there. I look forward to the rest of the discussion, but that's just some initial thoughts on how we're thinking about the workforce of the future. Mark, back to you.
Aaron, thank you very much. Really interesting comments, which I'm sure people have questions about. I'd like to turn it to Josh Kopis.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. And Dr. Jaja, that's going to give us a lot of data and a lot of things to dig into in the course of our discussion. And I'm looking forward to that. I want to first start by recognizing that Jobs for the Future was actually founded about 40 years ago as Jobs for Connecticut's Future. Somewhere along the line, we made the decision to move to Boston, Massachusetts. I wasn't involved in those decisions, so please don't fault me for that move. But the organization was founded on a concern that the state wasn't keeping up with the pace of change and the shifting needs and expectations of workers and employers in the state. Sound familiar? Really, we've grown as an organization to be working now in most of the 50 states across the country. And hindsight has taught us, and I think as Dr. Jaja mentioned, that it really isn't just the state's responsibility to respond to those shifting needs and expectations. It is going to take a collective effort across institutions and people like those represented here on this call to really figure out how to create parity of power around what those expectations and needs are across institutions and across that relationship that workers and employers manage on a day-to-day basis. So I'm here today mostly to provide what I can to what we're seeing in terms of how that conversation, that relationship is evolving between workers and employers. Hopefully in the course of dialogue, we'll also have an opportunity to discuss the role of workforce boards, of education institutions, of governments and quasi-governments, and helping to make sure that that relationship and those expectations and needs between employers and workers are met. One of the things that, really over the course of the last 2 years, I think, in response to some of those issues that Dr. Jaja mentioned, workers are starting to re-examine their relationship with work. And are starting to ask, questions about the relative value of a job. And those questions have started to, open up, opportunities to think about what inherently is involved in that transaction between an employer and an employee that extends, far beyond compensation. I'm sure a lot of folks on this, on this call have been having conversations about the importance of living wages, about the importance of trying to make sure that for initiatives and for job training programs sponsored by the state and supported by local workforce systems, that we're making sure that the people that we train and prepare for work are entering into jobs that have a living wage and have a relative level of quality. What I'm seeing here at Jobs for the Future and what we're trying to respond to as an organization is that now we're starting to ask questions about the structure of jobs, the precarity and stability of jobs. Dr. Jaja mentioned the importance of childcare and how much that's preventing, prime age workers from getting back to work. Is that a responsibility that employers, potentially need to find a way to help their workforce support? So we've done some research actually over the course of the last year in partnership with Turning Basin Labs. I don't have slides, but I will drop some links into the chat that showcase what we're hearing as we talk directly to workers about their shifting expectations related to that relationship with their employers, and how and where we're seeing opportunities to engage employers much more authentically, and how to make sure that that the jobs that they're creating are adequately meeting the needs and expectations of workers that for a variety of reasons are slow to get back to work. I also want to call to the attention that I've been a workforce professional for about well over a decade here, and we've talked about business engagement for a long time. Over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, I have never seen employers as authentically engaged in trying to meet those needs and find opportunities to shift their business practices to be more in tune, not only with the needs of their workers, but also with the needs of their communities writ large. JFF has actually developed a framework called the Impact Employer Framework, which identifies some of the key levers of change that we see some of those impact employers beginning to institute within their companies, that is starting to set them apart. And that I think is going to be an important set of behaviors that employers are going to need to start to adapt to make sure that that transaction and that value proposition of work is something that we can continue to maintain as the labor market and as the needs of our communities and the people within it really continue to rapidly evolve. So Mark, I will drop some of those resources into the chat. I know we'll have plenty of opportunities here through the course of dialogue to dig more deeply into specific case studies and examples that I can bring to bear. So thank you for having me. This is a fantastic group, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Josh. Really do appreciate it. And I want to also kind of just remind people that to use the chat line as you're thinking about questions that we'd like to ask panel members going forward. Next, I'd like to bring Daniel Culbertson to speak about some of the latest trends that you're seeing in the Indeed hiring lab going on right now in the labor force. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Mark, and hello, everyone. It's very good to be here with you all today. So as Mark mentioned, I'm an economist with Indeed, the job search site. For those of you who may not be as familiar with Indeed, at its core, it's essentially a job search site that is attempting to find that match between getting employers, workers, and helping people find jobs. We're a leader in the United States and in several markets around the globe. And we also have a pretty large presence in Stamford, Connecticut with our office there. But that is all to say that looking across the labor market through our job posting data, our job search data, our resume information, we have quite a pile of information, which is why they have economists like myself on staff. But what I'd like to do today is go through some of the research and some of the trends that the economists at Indeed have seen recently inside the labor market. So think of this as a quick look at the labor market to get a sense of how things are today. And some of the trends and some of the issues that were mentioned in Dr. Jaja's talk at the top will be reflected here as well. And so this will be a look at some of Indeed's current trends and data points. I'd like to get started with looking at the labor market very broadly. This line that you see here on the chart is the trend for overall jobs on the Indeed site. This is something that we never spoke about publicly before because of reasons tied closely to our business, but with the pandemic, it gave us an opportunity to step in and provide some real-time data about the labor market. The way we show this data of the overall trend of job postings on our site here in the United States is this is the percent change in job postings since February 1st, 2020. So just making a comparison back to that pre-pandemic baseline and observing how the labor market has gone since then. I should note that as a job postings aggregator, Indeed scrapes jobs from all across the internet. Anything that looks like a job posting within reason winds up on our site. So this is, we like to consider a look at the online labor market at large. To cover this trend, you can see the impact of COVID-19 on the left side of the chart, where we lost about 40% of the job postings on our site from February to May of 2020, which is to be expected given what we were going through at that time across the economy. But you can see how the labor market has come back since then. As of October 1st, so this is relatively recent data, we're 45% above our pre-pandemic baseline. So compared to where we were before the pandemic, there are 45% more jobs on our site. I think this mainly speaks to the amount of demand that is out there in the labor market for workers. Mark mentioned at the top of the broadcast that job openings as measured by the federal government are at an all-time high. And Dr. Zaja mentioned in his talk that we are making up a lot of ground from the depths reached during the pandemic. And this is something that we see reflected in our data. We see employers coming to our site and looking to make hires, and we see an incredible amount of demand in the labor market. On the next slide, we can take a look at some of this job postings data segmented out by sector. And this also reflects something that was mentioned in Dr. Zaja's talk about how we see a different pace of rebounding and recovery across the labor market. This is our job postings data segmented out by a selected group of sectors. What we are doing in the middle column of this table is making a comparison to where we were as of September 24th inside these sectors, as measured by job postings on our site. Again, comparing back to that pre-pandemic baseline. At the top of the table, we have some of our labor market leaders, loading and stocking, which is essentially just warehousing roles, and production and manufacturing, anything related to goods, making goods or moving goods around, have done remarkably well throughout the pandemic, speaking to just the sheer amount of demand for hiring inside the labor market. We've seen human resources job postings pop up on our site the past couple months. Employers are looking to hire, and they're looking to hire people who can help them make hires. And then here at the bottom of the table, we have some of the sectors that are lagging. And these are the ones you might expect, service-related sectors that require a lot of face-to-face contact, a lot of leaving the house. Those are the sectors that have taken the brunt of the pandemic, and those are the ones that have been a bit slower to rebound. If we look at the next chart, in addition to all of that jobs recovering of jobs and making up for lost ground that we see during the pandemic, and new industries cropping up and industries that are doing quite well, looking to expand right now. On top of all that, what is making a very difficult situation for recruiters is the amount of churn that we're seeing in the labor market. This table is here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This measures quits rate broken out by industry. And what you see here with the blue bar is where the quits rate was in each one of these industries pre-pandemic, February of 2020, and that's making a comparison with the purple bar there to July of 2021. And so quits rate typically mirrors the economy or the performance of the economy pretty well. When the economy is thriving and doing well, people are more confident to leave their roles. And that's what we see now. At the bottom of the table, you see some of the sectors with the largest increase in their quits rate going through the most churn: retail, trade, leisure and hospitality, manufacturing. These are all industries that were impacted by the pandemic and are trying to rebound quite strongly right now. I should also note that the baseline here, February of 2020, was an incredibly strong labor market to begin with. And so to see this quits rate increase even more at a time like right now just speaks to the amount of stress that's being put on the labor market and recruiters who are looking to hire. On the next slide, I want to talk briefly about some of the supply side issues that have been impacting the labor market this year. Some of these have already been mentioned, so I'll cover them rather quickly, but this run up in demand that we've seen in the labor market has created a very difficult hiring situation because of these supply side constraints. Some of these have passed already. So much of the unemployment during the pandemic was temporary in the sense that many of those workers who became unemployed during the pandemic were waiting to go back to their previous job, and many of them did. So that's one of the reasons we didn't see the wave of new candidates that we might have expected over the past year. Another supply side factor, and this one is very hotly debated, and I think this is one that researchers are going to be looking at for quite some time, but the extended unemployment benefits possibly / likely had some type of disincentive to work and kept people on the sidelines of the labor force, but it's very difficult to measure this midstream as we are right now. Those benefits just ended at the beginning of last month, but it's also very difficult. It's going to be very difficult in the coming months and years as we research this more to pinpoint an exact number of people who stayed on the sidelines of the labor force because of this particular reason. On the next slide, we have some of the supply side constraints that are still a factor today. First and foremost, throughout the pandemic, COVID-19 has been the boss in some sense. Everything with the path of the recovery is very closely tied to the virus. And one of the ways that is so is that caution over the pandemic, people worried about getting sick or getting their family members sick from working roles that carry a risk of exposure. That is still something keeping people on the sidelines of the labor force. There's many different measures of this. The Census Bureau has one, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has one. They all measure this in different ways, but the important thing to keep in mind is that we saw these levels of people who were sitting out of the sidelines of the labor force out of caution rise with the onset of the Delta variant. So the path of the pandemic is still very much closely tied to and exerts some impact on our economic recovery. This was covered at length before, but disruptions in in-person school are creating problems as well, especially for getting working parents back into the labor force for some occupations that may be a bit more dependent on working parents in general. So part-time occupations or occupations that tend to be a bit more female dominant and rely a bit more on working mothers are certainly feeling the pain here. Two more trends that I want to cover deal with remote work. This is something that is a factor now, and this is something that is likely going to be part of our lives once we get past COVID-19. We can see job seeker and employer interest in remote work. This chart here measures job seeker interest in remote work and looking at the share of all job searches on our site that features some type of keyword related to remote work. One thing you may notice is that looking at this line, this trend line pretty closely mirrors the path of the pandemic. At times when the pandemic was at its worst, job seeker interest in remote work would rise. And that's something that's true over the past couple months with the onset of the Delta variant. We've seen job seeker interest in remote work rise again, and you'll notice on the far right side of that chart, it's high as it's ever been. So job seekers are still increasingly keen on remote work. From the employer side, looking at the share of job postings on our site that feature some type of mention of remote work, the trend's a bit less volatile, but some of the points remain the same. It's risen, as you would expect. With the onset of the pandemic, it stayed in growing importance throughout 2020, leveled off a bit this year, but has peaked up again, I should say perked up again with the onset of Delta variant and is much higher than it was before. I want to wrap things up quickly because I know we're at time and I know we have a lot of great other discussion, but with some of the typical advice I give to recruiters from the economist standpoint, I spend a lot of my time here in my role at Indeed speaking with recruiters and trying to educate about the labor market. I want to cover some of these quickly. First and foremost, in a tight labor market where talent is difficult to find and demand for workers is high, pay is going to be the big question. So evaluating pay packages down from everything from base pay to higher incentives on down the line is imperative at a time like this. Remote work, we saw the trends, how job seekers are increasingly keen and more keen than they've ever been on remote work. So whatever opportunities you have in your organizations for remote work, and then also whatever flexibility you can still in your positions that aren't remote is going to help you remain competitive. Don't mind the gap. There are many different reasons why people might have a gap on their resume now. Could be their own unemployment, family members' illness, their illness, childcare. If you have screener questions or if gaps on resumes or unemployment are typically just a turnoff for you and your organization, that's a lot of talent that you're going to be leaving on the table at a time like this. And then lastly, with the uneven recovery, we saw the variation across the labor market inside of industries that are doing quite well and have lots of opportunity and those that are lagging. In some of those lagging industries, if there's adaptable skills there, if you're willing to train some of those workers, those industries that don't have as much opportunity for job seekers yet at this stage in the recovery. Could be great talent pools for you all to mine. So I just wanted to cover some of the basic trends that we've been seeing in Indeed data. I hope this sets the table for some of this, the discussion later and some of the questions. You can keep up with our research at Indeed Hiring Lab. But with that, thanks for your time, and I'll turn things back over to Mark so we can get moving on with the discussion and the questions.
Daniel, thank you very much for all that kind of real-time data and analysis. Next, I'd like to introduce Ravi Kumar, the president of Infosys, to provide his observations on the labor market shortage and maybe some kind of strategies that Infosys is employing to try to really innovate around the labor market right now. Ravi?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for the opportunity. The three panelists before me did such a wonderful job that I have very little to say. But I'm going to kind of, substantiate all the points all three of them made. This is actually a very unprecedented time. It's almost like the tale of two cities, an era of ironies, if I may. Never before there's been a gap which is so wide of jobs which are already there in the market to the workforce which is also available in the market. Just at a national level, if you see the September jobs report, there are 10.9 million open positions across all industries, and there are only 8 million people available for jobs. And just the dichotomy, that irony is so startling that there is so much more we have to do to actually bridge that gap. And why have we landed on this part? I think some of the presentations before covered it, and I'm going to kind of draw upon a few trends. I think the workplace of the past and the workplace which we have all been used to just before COVID hit was set by the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution created this linear equation of work, workplaces, and workforce, and education being at the start of that funnel. That linear force was already getting disrupted with digital transformation. And in fact, in some sense, ironically, the pandemic actually accelerated the digital transformation. And industries and companies which were becoming software companies are going actually at much larger pace to be one. Software is actually going to be the new alchemy. There are three industries which didn't really touch software, that is healthcare, education, and housing. And those are the only three industries which did not do well in the last 30 years of America. In fact, inflation has gone up by 50% in the last 30 years. Education, healthcare, and housing has actually gone up by 100 to 150%. And that's because there wasn't deep embrace of technology and software. I think Marion actually spoke about the car industry, and it's such a fascinating one. Every car company today, every automotive company today is actually saying they're not going to be they're not going to be a combustion company. They're not going to be an internal combustion company. They're actually going to be a software company, because 50% of the cars by 2035 are going to be electrified, battery run, and software led. So the industries are changing significantly. And that is actually the starting point on which this whole premise and this gap which is created. There are 5 or 6 things which have kind of come as a confluence, which has created this ironic situation we are all in. First and foremost, I think the untangling of work from workplaces and workforce, the untangling of work from workplaces and the dispersion of work in a virtual manner is actually going to create much more opportunities than ever before. And that is going to be an opportunity for states like Connecticut to actually drive the future for. Workplaces are no longer going to be about people, full-time workers. The Industrial Revolution set workplaces as full-time workers. Workplaces are going to be people plus gig workers, part-time workers, because work is very modular. It's got dispersed out of workplaces, and it's going to be with machines. Machines are actually going to do the problem solving and humans are going to do the problem finding. So in some sense, there's going to be much more cognitive diversity in workplaces. One of the reasons companies like Infosys are actually building capabilities out of non-STEM talent is the reason is because you need much more cognitive diversity in workplaces. Work is actually going to be intertwined with education. We refer to lifelong learning. In fact, the skills are so short-lived that the point of actually hiring for degrees doesn't make any sense anymore. The point for hiring skills makes more sense. In fact, the point for hiring potential makes much more sense. So I think, all companies across the world are going to move from hiring for degrees to hiring to skills to hiring for potential. And that transition is going to create, work getting dispersed out of workplaces, hiring for skills and hiring for potential, and untangling work out of workplaces is going to create an opportunity for us to reset on diversity and inclusivity in workplaces. In fact, education will be fully intertwined with work, and we have to figure out a template on how to create micro-credentialing at work so that will help us to actually get more of this. So putting all this together, we have got to this point of this gap between the number of people available for jobs and the number of jobs available. Just to draw from that national statistic to Connecticut, Connecticut is actually 1% of the national labor, and 1% of the national labor should potentially have, if I take the 10.9 million jobs and extrapolate, roughly around 109,000 jobs available. Connecticut, as we talk, has 130,000 open positions. Connecticut equally has 130,000 people available for jobs. So it's almost a 1:1. And if the reskilling infrastructure of the state can enable it, we could bridge this gap and we could actually be at a much better place than where we were even before the pandemic. So that's the first important thing to note. Interestingly, a lot of people across the US are resigning from existing jobs. In fact, there was a survey which was conducted which actually said it's a great resignation era. And there's another survey which is being conducted now which talks about the great opportunity era. 40% of the people in jobs today have actually said they're going to leave their current jobs in the next 3 to 6 months. In fact, more than 15 million people since April of 2021 have left their jobs. Ironically, 40% of them don't even have a job in hand and they've just left the job and they said, we're going to sit at home, but we're not going to do the jobs we're doing. Why? That is because social mobility on jobs, upward mobility of jobs, has actually not happened in the last 2 decades. The American dream was all about starting at any point in a job career stream, but getting to the top of that career stream seamlessly, and that social mobility has not happened. In fact, 50% of the next generation at the same age are not going to have the same number of opportunities as the current generation has. That isn't what the American dream is about. The American dream is about the next generation having more opportunities, more prosperity than what the current generation has. And how that happened in the past was education was the bridge. Education is no longer that bridge. And I think we have got this unique opportunity to reset ourselves and to actually build a much better tomorrow, because all these forces which have come together have dismantled degrees as a need, have actually created skills in a very short window. The life of skills is very short, which essentially means anybody can pick it up and run and actually get a job. Has actually dismantled the work out of physical workplaces, which essentially means it can go to rural Connecticut and not just restricted to the cities of Connecticut. In fact, today, if you look at it, 85% of the jobs are in the top 5 cities in Connecticut. How do we actually take that out of those cities? In fact, there are 2 million open positions in the northeastern corridor of the US. Those are all accessible for citizens of Connecticut because work is so virtualized. Most of my clients today in New York actually say, I don't care if your people are in Hartford or in Connecticut, as long as they're as long as they're virtually available and potentially 1 or 2 times a week, if they can actually be physically accessing work, we are fine with it, which essentially means work is going to move away from rich urban settings to rural parts of America and rural parts of states like Connecticut. So that's the opportunity we have. So what is the bunch of recommendations I have for the communities in Connecticut, starting from corporations, academia, and policymakers? Hire from schools and colleges and build a feeder of talent. We do that in a small way at Infosys, and I'm really hoping we can get everybody else to do that. In partnership with the state, academia, the Governor's Workforce Council, leveraging the reskilling infrastructure, create upward mobility in jobs. In fact, a large number of people who worked in hospitality have quit the jobs. They don't want to come back. Create upward mobility in jobs. We have run a program with Google certifications and Year Up to actually start jobs as an apprenticeship. Even if you have mid-career done a different job, you could have worked in a restaurant, you could have worked in a hotel, or you could have worked in a teller of a bank. You could actually pivot yourself to jobs of the future with reskilling to be done, and embed reskilling into workplaces, micro-credentialize those reskilling opportunities, and make sure that you actually hire for skills and potential. 85% of the jobs in Connecticut today are still advertised with an undergrad degree need. It is not needed. We are trying to take that away from many of the jobs we are advertising. In fact, we do it as well. We also have undergrad requirements. We're taking it away from many of it. I hope all employers can do that. 50% of the workforce in the United States doesn't have an undergrad degree. Create feeders from community colleges. 25% of the workforce actually comes from community colleges. Create a feeder from there. Look at the Northeastern belt as your opportunity, not just Connecticut, because the Northeastern belt, any job you get could literally be virtualized, and you could work out of your home or work out of any town or city as long as you have good broadband. Many jobs are available in a virtual manner. Invest heavily on K-12 schools. That's where lifelong learners are built. Hire for mid-career shifts so that you create the social mobility needed. In fact, people are leaving these low potential jobs because they don't see that upward mobility. So create that and retain all the talent you have in the extraordinary academic ecosystem in Connecticut, which is actually available for Connecticut corporations first before they actually go to other parts of the US. And intertwine education and work together so that it is much more pervasive. So that's broadly what we are seeing, and we're very excited about the work we do with the local colleges, community colleges. In fact, I spoke about cognitive diversity. We work with the Trinity College to hire liberal arts grads. We actually bring people with backgrounds of sociology, anthropology, and get them to the Trinity College and actually do pathways with them. We equally are excited about our new partnership we started with Google. So we're hiring without a degree with Google certifications, which are sponsored by Infosys, and then we actually hire those people onto jobs as an apprenticeship, and then we take them off to the core jobs. We've also created a template where you could learn, earn, and work with us. So you get 60 credits for the work you do, and universities in the US actually give you an undergrad degree if you want one. We don't need it, but if you want one. So lots of new templates and new formats are going to really work in the future. We're all setting ourselves with. So this is an extraordinary ecosystem of academia, policymakers, and corporations coming together. And I think Connecticut is pivoting for a great reset, and it is going to be powered by these opportunities. Look at it, we have 130,000 jobs available. We have 130,000 people looking for those jobs. If we build that bridge in between, the problem is going to be simpler. So thank you, Mark, for this opportunity to talk to everyone on this call today.
Ravi, thank you for sharing those exciting strategies that you guys are taking and that I think are open to all employers or many employers. We had a lot of really great comments in the chat screen. So I'm going to be in a second inviting people who have a specific question, or even people who've been making comments, if they'd like to turn that into a question for the speaker. Let's start with, I'm just going to ask a question about retention, because several of the speakers have talked about the high level of turnover right now. The fact that we're seeing I saw a statistic that 2.7% of the workforce is leaving the workforce every month. And 2/3 of them don't even have a job. In other words, they're kind of taking their chances and rethinking. First of all, does this seem right to the panelists that this is happening? And then, in terms of, is this accurate? And then what can employers do? What should employers doing to be able to better retain their employees?
So Mark, let me go first. I did mention this, 15 million people in the US quit their jobs since April of 2021. There's a survey which spoke about 40% of people wanting to leave their current jobs in the next 3 to 6 months. They've expressed their desire to leave. 40% of them don't even have a job in hand. I think there are 2 or 3 things which will be very important. First and foremost, we should create, upward mobility in the organizations so that people can start to land at a point and then progressively go up the chain. How do you build training infrastructure to support that upward mobility? That's very critical. More learning opportunities, that's very critical. The second is flexibility. Flexibility to work in a hybrid manner and allow individuals to do this at their level of convenience. You will actually find more people available for jobs if you actually open that up. Equally, as this is a era for great attrition, there is a era for great opportunities, because people are available. You would actually grab them if that's what it is. But it is indeed a time when the gap between jobs available to jobs people available is so much that if you don't change your employer value proposition to the needs of today, retaining talent is going to be harder.
And Mark, strangely enough, we need to look no further than the retail sector. I think it's one of the most fascinating things I've seen in the last year and a half. We're starting to see companies like Walmart and like Target invest in the education of their frontline employees, and are hearing that demand for career advancement and upward mobility and the acquisition of skills while on the job. It's an astonishing thing for me because right now at Jobs for the Future, I'm involved in running projects where we're preparing workers for jobs in construction and manufacturing and healthcare. And what we're hearing across the board, they're losing talent to the retail sector. It's the first time in my career I've ever heard any of those industries indicating that they're losing the war on talent to the retail sector. And that has been a very conscious effort. Retail sector has been very aware that workers have typically looked at that sector as dead-end jobs, and they've started to make real changes to respond to that, and are creating opportunities. And heck, in some cases, are beginning to transform themselves into institutions of education in and of themselves, which I think has very interesting repercussions for workforce boards and for education institutions to really think about, employers not just as employers, but actually part of the skill building ecosystem, and how to leverage that in new and interesting ways is something that I think is very much part of the new frontier, and has to be something we're all taking very seriously.
So interesting, because companies 30 years ago really started to reduce their internal, job training. And what I'm hearing you say now is that that's almost a necessity if companies want to attract and retain workers. There were some really good questions in here about, I saw Representative Walker ask, has wage growth kept up with the cost of living for a lot of these jobs? And also questions about transportation and other kind of barriers to employment. Some people have said we're getting a major setting of the social contract almost between employers and workers around wages and other aspects too. What are your thoughts on that? Are we, is this likely to be kind of an ongoing trend that we're going to just see a difference in kind of the power dynamics even between workers and employers and what workers are going to be expecting?
I think it's a mutual arrangement, Mark. I don't know that I think of it as a power dynamics, but I think that if you put together sort of the hard and soft benefits that employees are looking for, both in terms of comp and benefits, but also in terms of what they get to work on, the development they get, the speed of that development, offering them a compelling package that's fulfilling to them is really, really important. And obviously different jobs have more potential for that, but there's plenty of examples, to the earlier point that Josh made, where retailers have found a way. I think of Starbucks as a great example of a company that's really done just that and really transformed what it means to be in retail. So I think you're going to find that people will then have the benefit of less churn, more productive employees, healthier employees, and people are going to start to see that there is a different way to balance the equation. And I think that's really what's going to happen. As far as the power goes, I think we're seeing some real wage growth. I think there's a lot of news in the press right now about inflation, but a lot of that is transitory. It's driven by the bottlenecks that I described. And it's also headline inflation at the very top, not median inflation. If you actually look at middle goods, it's very different. But used cars, for example, have driven a huge part of inflation. But we are seeing real wage growth. What we're seeing is a rapid return to the situation we were in 2019 with high levels of employment and wage gains. And that's going to cause most employers to look for ways to retain employees, to drive greater productivity, rather than because otherwise you sacrifice profits in order to maintain the wage growth.
I see a lot of questions in here relating to healthcare, which is one of the biggest industries, if not the biggest, in Connecticut. And it has a lot of challenges. So I don't know if one of the individuals kind of that was in the chat here wants to kind of ask a specific question about healthcare. Like, I don't know, Marcia, if you wanted to ask the panelists kind of, what, or one of the healthcare institutions here wanted either to kind of comment or ask a question.
I'm happy to comment if you want. This is Andy. Yeah, so I'll comment on University of Connecticut's health system, UConn Health. It was really a question, sort of a question or a comment, mixed with a comment, should I say. One is, I guess it's sort of in healthcare, and I agree with you that healthcare has been sort of behind the curve when it comes to software sort of adoption, and therefore that has caused sort of a different trajectory for healthcare. But one of the things that I noticed is that with the pandemic, we thought when we were in the middle of the pandemic that the whole world would change completely for healthcare. And it did change when you talk about virtual health, and you talk about some of the workers that are not needed on site working from home. But beyond that, I think the pendulum swung back further than a lot of us thought it would swing. So where we're currently sitting now, it's not feeling that much different in terms of at least from my perspective, in terms of before the pandemic and now. And in fact, I remember for emergency departments, we used to say, well, the volume's not going to come back. Well, the volume came back, and it's actually more volume than we had before. So that's an example. So I guess my question from that is, does a lot of this discussion about the future state depend on how far back the pendulum swings from where we are today in general as a country? Because what undergirds that question is we want to be careful not to match long-term solutions with short-term problems. And so, for example, saying machine learning is going to replace sort of it's going to be skills plus machine learning. So therefore, degrees are not necessary. Could that be maybe we're matching a long-term, a long-term situation, machine learning, with a short-term problem, this gap in workers. So I don't know, don't want to talk too much, but that's just one of the questions that was in my mind.
Panelists?
I don't know if I have any good insights into the question posed there, but if you'd like, I can keep on the healthcare topic. I see Marcia's question, I believe you mentioned earlier, Mark, and I think that was directed at some of the slides that I had there. So Marcia commented that it was surprising that nurses and other healthcare roles weren't being reflected as in need. I'll note that that table that I had up on the screen was a selected look at sectors across the labor market as measured by our job postings data, and healthcare just wasn't featured on that table, not for any particular reason. I can tell you that if you look at our job postings data and you look at some of the more prominent healthcare fields like nursing, personal care, and home health, medical technician, physicians, healthcare is up on our site and outpacing the rest of the labor market nearly across the board. So it was a very strange year for healthcare, where they certainly felt the impacts of the pandemic. But at least when it comes to demand for workers, it was a pretty quick return to normal, where demand was outpacing the labor market again, and they were running into the same supply bottlenecks as before.
Okay, I'd like to
Mark,
call on.
Let me quickly add here. I think, if you look at that value chain of healthcare, 18% of the GDP in the US is spent on healthcare, and the value you get out of it, the outcomes you get out of it, is not at par. And that is because a lot of it is spent on things which are not related to essential care workers. Wages for essential care workers has not gone up for healthcare. They're underpaid, undervalued, but they're an essential service. So unless we squeeze the other parts of the value chain and divert some of that money into healthcare workers, you're not going to make this profession exciting enough for people to come. And it's a high pressure profession. It needs a lot of hard work. You have to work 24/7, round the clock shifts. But it doesn't actually give you the kind of money you can make out of it, because the wages are squeezed, because the rest of the value chain is inefficient and ineffective. Unless the rest of the value chain is efficient enough so that you could divert some of it to healthcare workers, you're not going to find this attractive enough. The percentage jump of healthcare wages over the last 10 years, you could notice it's actually one of the lowest.
I wanted to just call on Marna Borgstrom, the CEO of Yale New Haven Healthcare, to just comment on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, in listening to this, I have been in healthcare for a long time. I don't think that I have ever seen a confluence of factors that are creating as big a challenge for healthcare as we're experiencing now. And I've been in this for 45 years. The American Hospital Association, in declaring its top 3 priorities for the upcoming year, 2 years actually, have said priority number 1 is workforce, priority number 2 is workforce, and priority number 3 is workforce. And if you look at, and I suspect, if you talk to Jeff Flax or John Murphy or Kathy Szilard, who are participating in this, what you would find is we have never been busier. The patient volume is crushing. Today at the Academic Medical Center in New Haven, we are at 97% occupancy. And what happens is we become inefficient at 97%, which further dispirits the workforce because they're busier than ever and it's hard to manage the churn. Case mix index, which is a measure of how ill patients are, has gone up. and length of stay has gone up. And part of the reason length of stay has gone up is because when patients are ready to discharge, you can't safely discharge patients if there aren't adequate long-term care and rehab beds. And almost all of the long-term care facilities and rehab facilities have at least temporarily closed beds because they can't get staff, because I think in part to a part of Ravi's comment, the wages are so low in that sector that people are not joining. And then, the last thing, and I could probably go on and whine for a long time about these issues, but the other factor is behavioral health, because as a result of the pandemic, we have behavioral health as a comorbid condition for so many of the people who are seeking care now. And many of them are being taken care of in traditional acute care beds, but their primary need is a behavioral health need. And, we can't find behavioral health physicians, we can't find psychiatrists, we can't find PAs, APRNs, and nurses in adequate numbers. We're having a terrible time finding and retaining staff in the emergency departments and in the operating rooms, very high pressure areas. And, we're trying to redesign the work in part to, some of what Andy said, but, what you've got to do is for the 1,440 patients who are in the Academic Medical Center in New Haven right now, they expect something today. And so you can plan for the future, but in the short term, the demand is crushing and the supply is not there, and we are not creating enough nurses, PAs, and even support positions, radiology techs and lab techs. And a lot of those are hands-on positions. The pipeline isn't there for them, and the wages are going up substantially.
Thank you, Marna. Those are really kind of some hard realities that we have to kind of, face and deal with, as we, focus on the workforce opportunities in healthcare. I want to, there are a lot of other really good comments in the chat line, which we unfortunately couldn't get to given kind of time constraints. Unless I see Senator Austin has her hand up. So I wanted to just give you the last question. Go ahead, Senator Austin.
It's not really a question. When we're talking about the pipeline that we need, one of the things that Representative Walker and I have been working on as co-chairs of appropriations is a pipeline that is patterned after the pipeline for manufacturing. That would be a pipeline for healthcare. And it seems to me that that particular thing has not come to fruition as it has been subject to some other holdbacks and other such things. But don't you think that at the very minimum, we need to have a concerted effort into marketing these jobs that start at the very bottom and go all the way through the continuum to get people into those jobs? Generally speaking, they are good paying jobs. Even at the bottom of the rung, they could start there and then work their way up to a higher paying job. There is a trajectory upwards within the healthcare forum. I'd be happy to, and I know Representative Walker is on the call too, but I'd be happy to hear what people think about having a pipeline program that's akin to or similar to the manufacturing pipeline, where we could get people into some of these jobs, which I think are vital for our for a lot of reasons, but for our economy. Thank you.
Senator Austin, such a great point. And I hopefully Kelly, when in the next section, will in fact comment on some of our thoughts on moving in that direction, because I think it's such a great point. I want to stay on time, so I want to thank our tremendous panelists today. Very kind of stimulating, really kind of, I think both kind of really kind of laid out the issues very nicely, but also a lot of really practical ideas around solutions. So one of the things that we're going to be doing as a Governor's Workforce Council is we have all the materials, we'll be sharing it. We recorded both the chat line and what people have been saying here. And we will try to kind of like summarize this in terms of what are some kind of concrete actions that the Governor's Workforce Council can focus on coming out of this discussion today. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating in this. Next, we are excited to have Kelly Valeries, and we may have the governor, I don't know the timing exactly on this, but to speak about a very exciting reskilling program called Career Connect. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Valeries, who is the, as I think most everybody here knows, the state's chief workforce officer, the executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy, and has a long history in both manufacturing and education and developing training programs. Kelly?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you so much to our guests. That presentation was really amazing, and I'm very excited to see how the work that we're doing in the Governor's Workforce Council and the Office of Workforce Strategy can really address a lot of those issues that have been brought up in this robust conversation. And to that specific point, you know, we understand that there is this great mismatch between the current skill set of those who are seeking jobs and the jobs that are being opened, and also really understand that we need to move very quickly to upskill and reskill people. And it's an imperative not only for our economy, but a high imperative for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and ensuring that people who have been displaced and put on the sidelines for a long time with regards to being able to fully participate in workforce development training programs so that they can get those jobs that really do turn into careers, right? So we're focusing a program called Career Connect with an investment that the governor and our state legislators, and thank you very much to Senator Austin, Representative Tony Walker, and Representative Senator Juan on the call here today, along with many others who passed this legislation to be able to spend and focus $110 million on short-term sector-based training programs. So this program is really going to be the highlight of work that's going to be done with us moving forward. And with that, I also want to acknowledge that the governor is here with us to share in the excitement of launching the Career Connect program. And I will give a high overview of the program and how it will work, and then I will kick it to the governor to address the council and to provide his comments. So $70 million of this fund will come from American Rescue dollars. Another $40 million has been authorized in state bonding, and we're looking forward to the allocation of those funds to support this effort. We are currently working on an application portal that will be available for eligible institutions to apply for this funding. The focus really is on building a systemic framework in which we can really launch workforce development programs in a really effective way. And to Senator Austin's point, the Manufacturing Pipeline Initiative in Eastern Connecticut has been not only a state best practice, but nationally recognized best practice. And I had the honor of working with that team on the launch and the development and the launch of that program. And I've been working closely with the workforce boards on how we can take that framework and expand it to also include healthcare, IT, construction, and other high demand occupations as they occur across the state of Connecticut. And we're excited to be rolling something out in the near future around that, but creating this centralized portal also where it is that one stop where we can get people skilled up and matched with employers as some of our guests had said earlier, I think it was Dr. Jaja who was saying that we need a system in which is easy to navigate for our job seekers and makes it easy for our employers to find those employees that they're doing. And that's really the work of the workforce strategy and our office in being able to utilize these really important funds in this Career Connect program to be able to stand up a program like this that will be sustainable over the future, making sure that we're bringing our partners in government along with our workforce board system, our educational system, and our community organizations to really ensure that this system works to meet the individual needs and the businesses' needs, and making sure that businesses are in the center of this conversation. So we're driving a program that really meets their needs. So with that brief overview, I'd like to kick it over to Governor Lamont and thank him very much for all the support that he's provided here with the Career Connect in the Office of Workforce Strategy.
Hey, thanks, Kelly and Mark. Put up the big screen if you could. I just wanted to see this. I see a lot of friends here. You know, Kathy, Tony, and Tony, we got a lot of work to do. You know, the biggest strategic advantage Connecticut has is the quality of our workforce. We got to maximize and take advantage of that, which is why we have this workforce council. My friend Garrett Moran, I see there, you know, was whispering in my ear for a long time on this. Ravi Kumar, when he came up, we knew how important IT skills were to keep our state moving forward, and appreciate what that means. Jen, I see, and Peter Salovey. I mean, one of the ideas, you know, I've been thinking about is people graduate, I want them to stay in the state of Connecticut. I want them working here in our state. I mean, maybe we figure out a program working with Kathy and Tony, and we'll give a tax credit to that company, a significant tax credit if they forgive a student loan over 3 years as people, you know, work. I'm trying to do a better job of getting people into the workforce. I see Cindy Bigelow. Cindy, I think the Yankees need a little more Bigelow tea. They looked a little sleepy the other day. Going forward, Neil O'Leary, the great mayor of Waterbury. Thank you, my friend. Waterbury's cooking. There's a lot of things going on there. A lot of jobs moving in there. And let me just tell you why what you're doing is so important. The labor market is the likes of which I've never seen before. We all started out, you know, a few years ago. We saw this incredible disconnect between skills and the jobs that were out there. There still is that disconnect. That's what Career Connect is all about. But I'm also, I need your insights into how do we get people back to work, wanting to get back to work. I mean, we have a skills gap out there, but we also have tens of thousands of jobs in the service sector and restaurants, stores, and where we can't get people working again. And there I need some help from you. I mean, obviously we thought first, given COVID and given COVID anxiety, that was a natural reason that people were holding back. But we have the highest vaccination rate and the lowest infection rate in the country. And so that's a reason, but it's not a compelling reason at this point. We thought maybe the unemployment was a little too rich. First was 600, then it was an extra 300, but that ended, you know, well over a month ago now. And what do we need to get people back to work? I had the, you know, ARPA monies that came in, and I really wanted to focus on things that made it easier for mom and dad to get to work. So that meant we put a lot of that dough into more than just about any other state, you know, childcare, pre-K, expansion of that, make that universally available at virtually no cost to anybody earning less than $50,000 or $60,000. Give that kid the best start in life and make it easier for mom and dad to get back to work. I know a lot of people wanted to upskill and they thought that 4 years or 2 years is maybe too long. So that takes us to Career Connect, which is, you know, what Kelly was talking about. I love this idea. It's over $100 million. And it's not everybody needs 2 years and 4 years. Sorry, Jen and Pete, but everybody has a different skill set they need go forward. And in this case, we're finding that, you know, 70 to 80% of our kids don't actually graduate from a community college. And, they do better at the CCSU, but not. So we're trying to make sure we match the skills with the jobs that are out there. And our hope was, look, at absolutely no cost, Career Connect, we'll provide transportation for you. We'll provide daycare for you. You can go here, 18-week program, and you've got a guaranteed job. And that's in a whole broad array of different sectors where we have need. Obvious ones are manufacturing and healthcare, but even more than that. And here, I'd love your insights. Help us create the programs that are out there. Find some folks at your companies that can help us teach and help us put together the curriculum, because for the first time in our lives, we got the resources to do this and do this in a serious way. And I don't want to let this opportunity go to waste. I think it's key to the economic future of our state that we train the people for the jobs, to make sure that every employer knows he has access to the very best, well-trained workforce in the world. And also, there are a lot of kids who have been left behind for many, many years. And with these jobs out there going begging, here's our opportunity to lift everybody up. Make sure that cost and finance and daycare are not reasons that they can't go to the next level. So that's what we're trying to do with the Career Connect, which I think makes it a particularly important right now. But I get a chance to listen in a little bit more and to your comments, but I'd love your thought on what else can we do to help people get back to work? How is it that I've got 100,000 plus still on unemployment and 70, 80,000 jobs we're not filling? A lot of it is upskilling. A lot of it is getting people just back into the mode of working. And how do we do that? How do we get the right balance of telecommuting, because they've got new lifestyles going forward? And I'll just leave you with this one thing. It's true of state government as well. I mean, a lot of folks in the private sector think, man, state government is so great. Those pensions, whoa, everybody wants to be in state government. And maybe it was that way 25 years ago. It's not that way now. There have been reforms made over the way. Private sector wages are coming up. Ours have been held relatively flat. So we have to work really hard to get people back to work. And then I had to figure out, all right, do vaccine mandates bring more people back into the office because they know they can do it safely? Or there's some that are going to stay away and say, hell no, I'm not going to get my vaccine, or I'm not going to test because you can't make me do it. And that was a little bit of a risk we took, but thankfully, about 97% of our state employees spread all across state government have come forward. They said, overwhelmingly they're vaccinated, but it's still 10 or 15% that want testing, which is not as good, but I had to keep people working. We're working out some telecommuting ideas, but that's how we keep state government working. But I can't keep our businesses growing, expanding, and attracting new business to the state until they know they have the best trained workforce in the world. And that's why I thank each and every one of you. Some of you I've known here for years. Some I see new folks who are on the team, but I want to thank you. And I love the fact that the business community is taking the lead on this. And we've got our folks from labor and appropriations and others here from the legislature. We're doing this together as a team. And for that, I'm very thankful. Back to you, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Governor. Your support on this has been just absolutely vital. And the view of businesses and they're being put at the center and telling us what they need is also critical to this process. And I just wanted to, make sure that everyone understands that we're also providing supportive services, case management. We're ensuring that people get those childcare, the transportation they need, the technology that they need to really be able to engage. And we're going to be connecting programs directly to employers. So employers not only have the opportunity to have conversations and input as to what we're teaching in these programs, but also have access to the participants that are in these programs. We're highly encouraging employers to come into programs and interview people while they're still in class so that you have first pick and you can provide program participants with conditional offers upon successful completion of programs, and being able to, in some cases, have on-the-job training stipends to help you with those additional training things that you need to kind of get them into your organization in a level that is successful for them and you to move them forward. So we're very excited to be working with all of you on this. Our application portal has not been set up and ready to be accessed yet. It is under development. And as soon as we get that completed, we'll be making a big press splash on that, and we'll make sure that we send out information to everyone on this call today so that you understand what you can do to access the program. And we're also looking forward to working with our stakeholder groups on their applications. We're not trying to set up a competitive process here. We're trying to set up a collaborative process. So if you have ideas and you want to have a conversation with us, please reach out to us, and we're happy to engage in those conversations as we're working simultaneously to get the portal up and running.
Hey, Kelly, just probably got 10 minutes. If we could open up just for 10 minutes, any questions or comments I'd love to hear while I'm hanging around.
Absolutely.
Why aren't people going back to work? How can we get people back to work?
I have a question, if you wouldn't mind. And Governor, sorry about the Yankees. I'll work on that for next year. But yeah, so, I think you have a lot of businesses and organizations that are very excited to be and work with the Career Connect. But what are some of your strategies for getting people into the programs so that we have the access to put the apprenticeships in place?
Well, I'll start with that. Let me tell you some of the things we've learned. I'm the IT guy. We're going to do everything online. We're going to make sure everything's available to you electronically, make it easier for you to sign up, make it easier for you to get a job, expand Indeed to the public sector. And what I found with testing and vaccination is that leaves behind a significant piece of our population. A lot of folks that don't have access to the internet. So I think complementing that is what we got to do with our outreach and knocking on doors and telling people about the opportunities that are out there. We had the free learning camps. I had to tell people about that. When it comes to Career Connect, we got to tell people about that so everybody takes advantage of this, not just those who live online. The funny thing, early on when we were doing the vaccines, I told everybody 75 and above, you just go right to VAMS. It's easy, link right on. Well, half the people couldn't figure out how to get on VAMS. It was age related too. So that's part of an answer, Cindy, is we got to do a better job of outreach. And a lot of it demands outreach in person. A lot of that requires what we're doing at our schools. Colin Cooper may have some ideas in terms of manufacturing, how we tell kids about what the opportunities are.
All great points. Thank you, Governor. It's really important that our community organizations get involved. I see Lisa just popped up, and we've been having really robust conversations with her and how we can utilize the 211 system to get people into this portal, and having that central one point of entry into the system across the state and across programs is really going to make a big difference in the equity of getting people into these programs. So go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Kelly, and hello, Governor. Thank you for your passion on this important subject. And Governor, we at United Way of Connecticut and 211 are very eager to play a role helping support employers and the people we want to get back to work so that we can help people connect to what they need to be ready to go to work, whether that's childcare, additional food, or maybe it's utility assistance. And we're ready to do that. And we hope to, together with Kelly's leadership, find a way to relieve some of the burden on our colleagues on the front lines of the workforce system so that we can provide that assistance and the candidates are ready to go into training or to secure those jobs. We believe we can do better to provide more something like one-stop shopping for all of the supports people need so that they arrive at that one stop, ready to go into training, ready to go to work. So we think that's important. We think also that employers can do their part to help, as you said, get the word out about 211, to get the word out about VITA tax assistance so that their workers are getting the child tax credit, so that they're getting the benefits through federal assistance. And we believe at the same time, as we've heard here today, flexibility with regard to childcare, with regard to care for elderly relatives is critically important. We see that every day with our ALICE population. Please recall that even before COVID, 38% of households in the state were barely making ends meet. So the flexibility that we can offer to them to help make their life possible alongside work is critically important. So thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Governor. We're ready to partner and do even more for those families who need help.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Leticia and then Dante.
Hi, good afternoon. First of all, what exciting information that is being shared here today about these new opportunities to connect. I wonder specifically if you'll be undertaking public service announcements in relationship to this new work and effort for the Connect program.
That's a great suggestion, Leticia. I think it is very important that we are broadcasting this very widely in many different channels so we can ensure that we meet and get as many people hearing about the program as possible.
Dante?
Yes, thank you. And I'll be very fast because there's a lot of hands up, but to Cindy Bigelow's question, as well as Senator Oster's comment, please reach out to the Connecticut Department of Labor if you're interested in apprenticeship programs. We are looking for employers. That is the key to apprenticeships. When we customize them to the specific needs of what your business has and what you're looking to train, we do actually have quite a few now in healthcare, working with Yale Healthcare Systems on some new ones recently and others developing. So we're going to be talking more about some of the new ones soon, but please, we're looking for employers. So if you're looking for great employees trained the way that you would like them to be trained, please do engage with the Connecticut Department of Labor and the Apprenticeship Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Manette?
Hi, so I just want to make a couple of points. We all know that this is an awesome idea, and I'm very happy to hear it. But you have some organizations either on this call or organization that I represent, Community Action, that have been working steadily and closely with the community through the whole pandemic. We did an awesome job with the census, and it was during a pandemic. We are trusted organizations, just like some of the others on this call. And we don't want to leave behind the folks that were already struggling before the pandemic. So when we think about organizations who already have a roadmap and a connection with these folks, with folks that we want to engage, the governor mentioned some categories of folks, and he's asking, who are these folks? Where are these folks? And most importantly, how can we connect to these folks? You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. You have folks, you have organizations that are implanted in communities of need, communities of color, communities that are low income, that could easily step into a gap to connect these folks with these services and also follow up with these folks, hold their hand while they become successful. It's not enough to connect folks with a website. It's not enough, we learned that the hard way. It's not enough to connect folks with a phone number. We must usher folks into success in a meaningful way where they start to trust us again, because trust has been damaged for about 18 months. So if we want people to get vaccines, if we want people to get back into the workplace, we have to reestablish relationships with meaningful, trusted organizations. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but let's not forget how we got it right before the pandemic. Thank you.
Next, Amber Burke.
Greetings, everybody. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful idea, and I'm looking forward to see when it rolls out and comes to fruition. But as I represent the Department of Developmental Services and those with intellectual disabilities, and the one thing I just want to comment on is, as we're creating these platforms and different ways to re-engage individuals back into the community, there's a very underutilized population out there, those with intellectual disabilities, that can tap into jobs, that can be dependable and resourceful individuals who can do jobs. The problem is, first, the direct support professional, there's a shortage. So even if the individuals that are supported by the Department of Developmental Services and community partners acquire or obtain a job, the supports that they need sometimes when they're in those jobs the bodies are not there, the professionals are not there because there's a shortage. So we have to find a way to re-engage those direct support professionals, to let them know that their roles are very important. They have a critical role in ensuring that individuals with disabilities, specifically those with intellectual disabilities, can achieve and accomplish competitive integrated employment. The other piece that I also wanted to, two other things I would like to mention is one, transportation. If our individuals are employed and they are able to secure employment, getting to and from has to be an easy, unintentional barrier. To take or suggest that they take Uber or to take Lyft, it costs more for them to get to work and get back from work than what they're normally getting paid weekly or biweekly or what have you. And then for many parents who are trusting for their loved ones to go to work with an Uber or Lyft, that also puts angst and anxiety for those parents because they're not sure if the individual is going to be safe going to and from work. Lastly, as you're creating the new platform, please bear in mind that if it's accessible, it should be accessible to all, especially those with intellectual disabilities. It should be user-friendly. They should be able to turn on the computer and be able to access it, and if not, have some support to help them access it, but they shouldn't be limited to someone walking them through the platform. So I just wanted to make those points, and I'm excited to see what comes to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. And great comments in the chat line from so many people here. Jen Widnes.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Governor, for your continued support in this really important effort. Since you called out higher ed a few times, I just wanted to note, we are definitely more than just about four-year degrees, and we're happy to help in these types of efforts with short-term training programs, short-term stackable certificates. We have, I talked to a president recently who's looking to build an upside-down computer science degree program where they get the skills first so they can go to work and then they can finish their bachelor's degree as they're already working. So I talked to Judy Olean, who's on the Workforce Council, about this a lot. So I just want to say, we're all in on this and happy to help with more than just four-year degrees. Judy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, I'm delighted to see these initiatives, and everything I heard in the panel about time to degree, the kinds of skill sets that are needed in the States, the fact that we have to be constantly reskilling people. I think that the institutions in Connecticut, in part thanks to the governor's great initiatives to get us back to education, are doing all of that. This notion of 18 to 22 four-year degrees as the only thing we do is really totally passé. And we're also supporting marginalized communities with direct outreach. So I hope you see us as partners. And frankly, we need all of the employers here to help us grow the programs that are needed. Marna, we have a lot of healthcare people, Jeff, John, and Kathy. We need the employers to come and provide immersive learning opportunities so that the transition to work happens as the students go while they're learning, and that there isn't a gap between school and work. So we need to partner with you.
Thank you, President Olean. Last comment here with, or question, Mark Fernandez.
Good afternoon, Governor. I'm the Director of Adult Ed in New Britain, and so I'm going to talk to you not as K-12 and not as post-secondary, but as the one that bridges and needs to be able to do upskilling with a lot of these people. But currently, the way adult ed is set up, anybody who has a high school diploma, I can't spend adult ed money on. And so two things I'm going to advocate in your next budget is, number one, you make it so that when somebody who has a high school diploma who is looking to augment their math skills, their literacy skills, their financial skills, that I can bring them into my coursework, which I already have in place, so that they can increase their skill levels. And also is there hasn't been a genuine increase in the adult ed budget in years, and it would be great if in your next budget there was a significant increase, because you're talking about educating the marginal groups, and we touch them faster than almost anybody else. And we're the ones that build them to the secondary. We're the ones that pick them up from the K-12 when something doesn't go well and they don't make it through to the 12th grade. And so we really are the ones that are we're working with those people that the presenters spent a lot of time talking about for the first hour. So I'm asking you diligently, and it would be nice if someone from CASE was in this committee with you, the Connecticut Association for Adult Education in Connecticut. They would be a great asset for you. But adult ed we're usually teaching in a basement, we're usually teaching in is that it really does need to become part of what you're looking for and give us the support we need so we can execute the deal for the people you're aiming at.
Mark, thank you very much for those comments. And that is one of our strategic initiatives to really kind of support and build the adult education system in the state. So, we invite your participation in that effort, with us.
Hey, Mark, just before I sign off, let me just, we've got the most significant increase in resources for workforce, I think, in the history of the state, Mark Fernandez and others. It doesn't necessarily go forever. A lot of this is federally related. So I want to make sure that we make these investments work and we have a chance to tell the federal government that this is an investment that made a difference as we try and quantify this going forward. And I say that across the board when it comes to daycare and childcare as well. We're going to really be tight in terms of accountability going forward. I want you to know that, look, the 2-year programs, the 18-week, we also have some immediate needs. If you've been reading the paper, I got kids with severe psychological distress in emergency rooms since we don't have nurses at Children's Health that can be there to take care of them. We have same problem at a number of our nursing homes right now with folks with disability and coming out of hospitals. Marna, I don't know why she's retiring. She's so young, and Jeff and the other team can tell you the same thing in terms of nurses, what we have. So there are some incredible immediate needs as well to get people back. And but I want to thank each and every one of you. I don't know who Bazia Della Ripa is, but she's got a screenshot of the Virgin Islands. So maybe she could give us some insights into how we get people back to work.
That's actually the photo I took when I was in Hawaii for my 50th birthday in the 50th state.
All right, you're not on the beach. That's what I cared about. Anyway, look, you're the people that care about this on the front lines. Tony and Kathy, and we've got our group of legislators who are ready to take the initiative and go to the next step. Show us how we can make a difference because we need you more than ever. And with that, I got to sign off. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Governor.
We really appreciate you taking the time here today and listening to the great points that a lot of our key stakeholders here made. So we look forward to partnering with you going forward. Next, Kelly is going to we're going to pick up some time here, by the way. Kelly is going to cover the updates to the strategic plan, as well as talk about the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we're doing. Kelly?
Great. Thank you, everybody, again, for that really robust conversation, and appreciate all of the comments that you put in the post. I couldn't respond to all of them, but we're going to go back and read them all and make sure that they're incorporated into the work that we're doing. And with that, we spent the last year working on the implementation of the strategic plan. And as any good business person will do, we're always looking for continuous improvement opportunities and how we can really push the work forward in a more meaningful way. And that is a continuous cycle in which we engage in. So Laura, if you could put up this slide. What we've decided to do based on the work that we've done in the past year on the implementation of the strategic plan is to do just a little bit of reorganizing, not deleting any of our priorities, but just focusing on how we can really push these action items forward in the fastest way possible. And that would require streamlining a little bit some of the 19 individual initiatives that we had planned. So just really briefly, I'm going to spend a few minutes on this, is we're going to take the leadership group and the business leadership group and really focus that on the regional sector partnerships. We have 8 partnerships launched across the state of Connecticut and more to come. We covered manufacturing across the state. We have IT in central Connecticut and Southwest, and we have bioscience in southwestern Connecticut, and so, or South Central. And we're really excited about the robust nature of these regional sector partnerships. And we're going to have Dawn Smith come in, and, or I'm sorry, Erica Smith come in and talk a little bit about what's going on in the bioscience regional sector partnership, but have this be the centralized place where businesses connect with each other and really discuss the issues that are related to skills-based hiring, quality jobs, how do we retain college grads, and all of those other really critical issues that are important for businesses to grow and thrive in the state of Connecticut. We're going to take the sector training program out of the Education and Career Pathways Committee and stand it up on its own. Having a $100 million investment in this initiative and how vital this initiative is to getting people upskilled and reskilled and address the immediate concerns that we have to getting people back to work and filling those jobs that are so critical to our economy. We're going to do real focus on sector-based training. With regards to the education and career pathways, really that work and all of those individual initiatives roll up to creating pathway programs from secondary programs to post-secondary, having those dual enrollment and dual credit programs, having robust workforce problem-based learning opportunities, ensuring that kids early on have career exploration and career exposure, and reimagining what career advising looks like in the school systems and making that an integrated part of curriculum rather than trying to add on another component to an already very stressed and robust working group there, but making sure that all of that rolls right up into how we create career pathways with stackable credentials and make sure that our students are not only college ready, but they're career ready, and that we address those 9,000 or so students a year that graduate without a post-secondary plan and make sure they have those industry recognized credentials to go into work and turn that work into a career. And making sure, and thank you, Mark, for your comments about adult education, and making sure that that is a real priority in the state of Connecticut, and we're focused on that. And it is really an equity issue with regards to adult learning, and those that have been most marginalized tend to be the ones that have the basic skills needs that need to be upskilled through the adult learning system. So we're really going to focus on that. We're making sure that we're addressing specific individual barriers to employment, and we're kind of going to rename our Equity and Access Committee to Barriers to Employment, focusing very closely on childcare, transportation, benefits cliffs, and any other cross-barrier solutions that need to happen to get people over the barriers to engaging in workforce development programs and getting them back to work. We're very proud of the partnerships that we have created here. We're working very closely with Beth Bai in the Office of Early Childhood. We're working closely with the Lieutenant Governor's Commission on Women and Children, and with the Department of Children and Families, and the Department of Supportive Services, and the list goes on how we are starting to really address those individual barriers. And then looking at how data is really going to drive the accountability of the initiatives on the Governor's Workforce Council. So taking data and performance and accountability right to the individual initiatives and embedding people who have been working very closely on this in these individual working groups to ensure we have those accountability measures that we can come back to you with solid data to show where we're making advancements and where we may need additional help. But also making sure that the work on creating the credential registry, the My Connecticut Journey, and enhancing the CT Hires platform to make it a real user-friendly, robust platform, not only for job seekers and students and employers, but for the workforce system that we're creating, the framework to make it much more effective and efficient throughout all of the steps it requires to get people into a job portal and then out into reporting at the other end when they get those jobs. So all of that is, really robust work, and it's just a little bit of a reorganization to ensure that we're focusing on the most important things and that the conversations that support those important headlining initiatives happen as they come up and as they're needed within those work groups. And to that, I am very proud to introduce to you all the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that has been stood up really based on the feedback that we received through the implementation of the strategic plan. And I want to thank all of you for the robust conversations that we've been having around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a difficult conversation to have, but it's probably the most important conversation that we can have. And if we all come into this conversation understanding that there is a lot here and a lot to unpack, and that we may not get it right when we're using language to each other, but we're all willing to be open-minded and to learn and to create a shared understanding about what these impacts are. And I'm really happy to announce that we have Sue Figurino from Travelers and Jay Williams from the Harvard Foundation for Public Giving as our co-chairs on this committee. We have engaged an extremely robust, highly dedicated group of professionals to be on the steering committee. And we have organized this work in ensuring that we're looking at some very specific barriers to entry of certain populations. And we frame them around re-entry, veterans, youth, persons with disabilities, which we've moved out of one of the other committees and into this. And then people of color, the BIPOC population, plus all of those racial minorities, and understanding that they all have some very specific barriers to entry into the workforce. Also understanding that one person may fit in many of these different subcategories, and also understanding that there's a lot of cross barriers that need to be addressed as well, such as, poverty in the ALICE population, homelessness, food insecurities, undocumented immigrants, women, the LGBTQ plus community. And so ensuring that we are really taking a lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion in not only this committee, but bringing these people serving on this committee and bringing their eye to these issues into the other committees to ensure that we have an equity, a lens through which we view all of the other work. And this group is really focused on understanding that we have very pressing needs that have to be addressed immediately. And we also have longer midterm and long-term goals and objectives that the group will need to come together and determine the best way forward on meeting those goals. So we really look forward to the robust conversations happening in these committees. We invite you to your participation here, and we really look forward to the work that's going to come out of this. I believe it's really going to make some really deep and systemic improvements in how we view and work with our populations and have equity and inclusion and diversity in everything that we do with regards to workforce development. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark and look forward to any comments that you may have that you put in the chat, and anybody who would like to reach out to us on this committee in serving on the committees in the future.
Kelly, thank you for that great update on where we're going in terms of our plan and our committees. And we will be in touch with all the existing and new council members with regard to what committees you wish to be involved with. I'd like to next introduce Beth Berwick and Raya Conrad Bradshaw from Europe. to talk about the work that we're doing around skills-based hiring in terms of really engaging our employers to really consider applicants based upon skills rather than only degrees. Ryan, Beth?
Thanks so much, Mark. Really appreciate it. Hi, I'm Beth Berwick. I'm with Grads of Life. We are an initiative within Europe, the National Skilling Organization, and we, our team is focused on helping employers with inclusive practices, and that includes skills-based hiring. You can go to the next slide. So I've been charged to talk a little bit about the business and social imperative of skills-based hiring, but I think the panel earlier said it better than I could. But it is critical that for this recovery that we shift to a skills-first paradigm, valuing skills over degrees. Research indicates that we have sort of become overly reliant on college degrees as proxies for job readiness. And even though approximately 65% of Americans do not have a four-year degree, this approach also creates pathways for a broader pool of more diverse talent to bring into companies and organizations. And as we think about the recovery. We did a research paper with Harvard and Accenture that talked about some of the research behind this, and the data shows that it doesn't necessarily lead to better outcomes and better performance. We saw that pre-pandemic, and I think that's becoming even more clear as we think about the recovery and where we go from here. I'm going to pass to my colleague Raya to talk a little about how we're supporting the Governor's Workforce Council initiative on Skills First. So Raya, I'll pass to you.
Thanks so much, Beth. I think given what we just heard about the priorities for the Governor's Workforce Council with DE&I at the core and all the work that we have seen being led in the state by emphasis by many of the influential employers, the Stanley Black & Decker on this, we know that there is a big appetite to begin to adopt skills first hiring, that those without a college degree are the most impacted in the recovery, and they need the most support in order to recover and return to work. And our work is, as Beth said, is really on how do we support the employer side in order to adopt the practices that they need to adopt, so that all of the training providers and all of the good work that talent developers are doing can make an easy entrance into employment. And so that employers can really focus on minimizing barriers. So what we're doing to ensure, to support the governor's strategy is to develop a community of practice of employers within the state across a variety of maturities. Some employers will be very mature on these practices. Some will be just starting out in the practices, and it will be a community of peers who will be able to help each other adopt more inclusive policies, practices, programs to support greater recovery and build out an infrastructure of tools, et cetera, that can help other employers. So we have a number of, we're launching this with a number of employers who have already committed. Stanley Black & Decker, Emphasis, we're talking to a number of other, Insurity, a number of others across the state, Synchrony, who have already said that they will join us. And we will be kicking off October 26th. We will combine the community of practice sessions with individual support and understand how we can support the state in a larger sense. I do want to say that this version of this is going to be focused on IT roles. So as you see, there's a large group that is that can participate, but this will be specifically around IT roles. We may do other sessions for other sectors in the future. Next slide. So what we're asking from you today, if you're interested in this, if this is a business priority for you, we are asking for you to participate. We're going to try to limit this to about maximum 20 companies in this first round, 10 to 20 companies. We have about 10 committed already. And so we're asking you to be a champion of this initiative, to identify who in your company would participate in this. We generally see both business leaders and HR leaders to be the target participants. And then set up a meeting with us. For those of you that we are already in conversations with, expect to hear from us very soon. And we really look forward to supporting large employers in the state to adopt these practices and to support equitable recovery.
Beth and Raya, thank you so much for your support and leadership in the work that we're doing here, and really making some of the comments the panelists talked about earlier come to life. Next, I'd like to invite Courtney Hendrickson from Advanced CT to give us a quick update on a really exciting initiative to retain our college graduates in Connecticut.
Thanks,
Courtney?
Mark. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, team. Great to be with you all this afternoon. Our Campus CT initiative, it's designed to retain college graduates in Connecticut. And you'll recall that we are not strong. We are currently ranked 41st out of 50 states there. So we hope through this effort to raise the rate by 5 percentage points. We modeled much of our Campus CT program after Campus Philly, who has seen tremendous retention success, which you can see here. Going to the next slide, our Campus CT experience is twofold. First, an app, also called Campus CT and available for download now, that brings students a custom scroll, much like TikTok, Instagram, and other social media apps that they already use. Employers post videos and short content on what they are looking for in young talent, job, internship, and networking opportunities, compelling content on what they stand for, so DE&I, which we've talked about here today, sustainability, and other values. Going to the next slide, think a short day in the life video posted by a young employee. Also featured is things to do around Connecticut, so students can connect with events, arts and culture venues, outdoor recreation, and food and drink spots, all posted with pictures, video, compelling content, and student discount information. We are also working right alongside the Connecticut colleges and universities so that they can help us promote this free resource to their students, as well as help us promote our in real life events. Going to the next slide, because the second part of the experience is live events, where students will engage in their community through employer-hosted networking events, career fairs, service projects, and social gatherings. The next slide shows that students are back on campus now, and we have piloted Campus CT in the Hartford region this semester. So far, we have about 20 employers signed up or in the process, and all 14 Hartford region schools, which represents 85,000 students. A next step is for us to work with our Connecticut high schools, as these are our college students and young graduates in a few short years. The last slide is available for you to click on the QR code, take a picture of that, and download the app. A few very quick additional points. Our civic leaders have also been invaluable in helping us promote this opportunity to their local business communities. So a thank you there. We are going to be continuing to expand Campus CT statewide in later this year and early 22. So be on the lookout for that if we haven't approached you yet. We do, however, encourage all Connecticut employers of all sizes who seek talent to join us in helping our college graduates put down roots here in our great state. So please download the app. If you are not a student, just choose the guest option when setting it up and reach out to us with feedback, questions, and your participation. Join us in keeping our young graduates here in state and watching them thrive in work and in life. Thank you, everyone, for your support.
Thank you, Courtney. So exciting. We're making progress on many fronts. And the last kind of work item we wanted to focus on today is we wanted to get an update from Erica Smith regarding the Bioscience Regional Sector Partnership, because there's some really exciting work going on there. Erica?
Thank you for including me. And actually, I think there's so much overlap. I'm thrilled to be part of this. So I'm Erica Smith. I'm the CEO of Renetics Bio. That was a company spun out of Yale to develop therapies for neurological conditions such as stroke, spinal cord injury, and multiple sclerosis. And I've been on the governor's workforce since the beginning. I'm so excited to see all the progress that's being made, from the beginning to now. And the Bioscience Collaborative was created as part of the regional sector partnership to advance life sciences with a focus in New Haven. And as an opportunity to toot our own horn as bioscience, as a reminder, Connecticut is 2 in the country for R&D, number 4 for venture capital investment, and number 4 for patents. So we have a lot to be proud of and a lot to leverage going forward. So we, as focused on the industry coming together, we, in our first meeting this summer, with the support of Garrett Sheehan of the Chamber of Commerce of New Haven, we had more than 20 life sciences CEOs, all the way from startup companies to companies representing over $10 billion of market capitalization, come together to determine what are the things that we need to do to make this better in a more robust region. This is a group that's representing many hundreds of local, very high-paying jobs from such companies such as Biohaven, Arvinas, Trevi Therapeutics, and one of the country's leading companies, Pfizer, which we're very proud of. And the group leaders identified that one of the key areas to grow and support is everything that we're talking about today, which is finding and recruiting talent and keeping people here in Connecticut. So it's a common phrase that we've seen. To address this need, the industry committee together agreed that the most impactful approach would be to start with college students, with a focus on working with the diverse community of colleges, making sure that we're supporting them and keeping them here in the area and giving them good and well-paid jobs. So where are we today? The industry leadership for this effort has met a dozen times, and we're developing a branded internship program for Connecticut that will launch later this year with internships for 2022. And I'm excited to continue conversations with some of the other programs that I've heard out here today. This internship program is considered to be an umbrella program for our companies. We are looking for a common application as well as a common recruitment process for placing students. We are looking to train students, provide them with resume, interview skills, and as well as the opportunity for students to cross-pollinate across companies and shared events. And based on a recent survey and discussions from the biotech companies in the region, we're expecting a strong engagement and already are identified what we believe could potentially be 100 internships just for the New Haven area this coming year. So although the business is taking the lead for making this happen, but we're so grateful for the infrastructure that exists in Connecticut. Just to name a few: BioPath, BioCT, CT Next. There's lots of momentum from the bioscience community as a whole, and this initiative in the very near term. We do believe that this is going to benefit companies with the talent, students with experience. One of the things that universities come to industry for is making sure that they understand the needs. So the stronger connection there is going to be quite important. And then overall, we just see the strengthening of the network between our companies and the bioscience community, helping each other and driving towards another goal. So look forward to sharing more momentum as it comes and to continue on conversations if you have any questions. Thank you.
Erica, thank you so much for that great update. And I'm going to turn now for a very quick update to Niall Dimando regarding the Good Jobs Challenge before we close out. Niall?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, just really quickly, I know a lot of you have asked questions about what the Office of Workforce Strategy is doing as these EDA grants have come out, specifically on what we're doing with the Good Jobs Challenge. And at a really high level, we are going to submit a statewide application that is going to leverage the regional sector partnerships, so the consortia of business that we've convened across the state, and really augment the infrastructure that we've laid out there, while also laying a groundwork for developing new partnerships that are aligned to getting people back to work, because that really is the intent of this Good Jobs Challenge, rather than some of the other EDA grants that have recently been released. This one is all about training and all about getting people back to work. So, but through a partnership-driven approach, which we feel we are uniquely positioned to apply for, given the work that our office and all of the great partners that we've been working with have been laying out for the past year and a half since we've kind of started the regional sector partnership work. So we are going to be applying for the full award amount, which there really is no limit. So we're determining what that is, but this could be northward of $30 million. So I would say if this is something that anyone on the call is interested in being involved with, please reach out to myself, Kelly, or Laura on the Office of Workforce Strategy. We will make sure that you are included in the discussions that we're having right now. We are still in the planning phases, but we are moving quickly in terms of putting together an application. But again, this is going to be statewide. It's going to be across all of the regions, across multiple industries. So we're trying to be as comprehensive as possible while meeting a fairly tight deadline, not as tight as the other ones, but still fairly tight with January 26th. So please reach out if this is something that you all would like to collaborate or participate in, and we will make sure that we're following up with you to make sure that you're included.
Thank you, Niall. I'd like to, Laura? Yeah, I'd like to just kind of thank everybody for participating in today's meeting. Covered a lot of ground today, but as everyone knows, the real work goes on between our meetings. We'll be reaching out to all the council members to discuss getting involved in the committee work where the work goes on. And to our many friends and participants today who are on today's call, you're encouraged to get involved. You know, the GWC process is open to all. And we have a lot of work to do collectively to get our people back to work, to prepare people for high quality careers and strengthen the economy in our state. So I encourage all to join this exciting effort. Our next regular council meeting is February 10th from 2:30 to 5, where we will have some more kind of breakout sessions that people can participate with smaller groups as well. So in the meantime, thank you very much, and everybody have a great evening.